What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. It's the end of a very busy week here in New England. The Patriots spending a lot of money, adding some big names, though not as many big names as maybe they would like. There was one big name release this week, and there are lots and lots of questions, not only about what happened with David Andrews, but everything else happening with the Patriots right now. So we're going to commit today's podcast to a good old-fashioned mailbag and try to answer as many of those questions as humanly possible. We're also going to hear from Rhett Lewis, the great Rhett Lewis, formerly of WHDH here in Boston, now of NFL Network, now one of the greatest minds we have when it comes to the NFL draft, and he was at the NFL Scouting Combine, and Rhett pays attention as well as anyone. He is tracking all the details. He is tracking all the players, day 1, day 2, day 3. He is all over it when it comes to the draft, and so we had a chance to speak with him at the Combine, and so we're going to lay that interview on you at the end of this podcast. So we're going to talk about offensive line. We're going to talk about the types of players Mike Vrabel wants. There is going to be some Will Campbell conversation. Will Campbell, who'da thunk, lightning rod of the pre-draft process in 2025 here in his arm length, and whether or not he's going to be able to actually play tackle at the NFL level. If you read my story with Dante Scarnecchia from late last week, you know that the godfather of offensive line play, the Patriots Hall of Famer himself, arguably the greatest, not only offensive line coach, but maybe assistant football coach of all time? Is he in that conversation? I think he is. I think he's gold jacket worthy, never mind red jacket worthy. Be that as it may, arm length, not a deal breaker for him. So should it be for us? We're going to talk plenty about the draft with Rhett. And we're going to get to some draft questions as well when we get into our mailbag. So why wait any longer? Let's jump right into that mailbag right now and start with the David Andrews release. At NHats Mihail. This is going to be hilarious for everybody at home as I read through these Twitter tags. But NHats, that's what we'll call you, still shocked by the release of David Andrews and its timing. I've also listened to your and Tom Carn's latest podcast and fully agree with everything said, but my question remains. Well, there's not, if you want to get technical, there's not a question there, NHats. But hopefully for everyone out there listening, you heard our initial thoughts and my initial thoughts on the David Andrews release, but let's dig into it just a little bit further and try to see it from both sides. One thing is obvious to me, and it's this. When it comes to the intangible thing that Mike Vrabel and his staff are currently chasing, David Andrews has that. Selflessness, putting the team first, doing whatever is asked. That kind of player is the kind of player David Andrews has been for the entire breadth of his career. Since he was an undrafted rookie coming out of Georgia, Bill Belichick's the only one who goes to his pro day and shows up there. He's not sure what his options are going to be, doesn't get drafted, thinks about signing with the Patriots, but saw they already had Shaq Mason. He's worried about Shaq Mason playing center. Bill Belichick tells him, no, he ain't playing center for us. And he was right. And David Andrews, soon thereafter, was the starter and had the incredible Patriots career that he had. But before you even talk about the on-the-field stuff that I think, had he been healthy, would have been able to bring to the table, you have to talk about those intangibles and the ability to show that he cares not only for his teammates within his position group, but his teammates across positions, the leadership that he showed as an 8-time captain and 2-time Super Bowl champion, the leadership that he showed within the community and the amount of time that he was able to give to those in need to try to cheer people up or try to help them in some way, shape, or form around the holidays. In season, out of season, didn't matter. The kind of player Mike Vrabel wants is what David Andrews is when it comes to the intangibles portion of the equation. Now, when it comes to the X's and O's, the reason why, again, if he were healthy, David Andrews would be the right kind of fit is because look who's the offensive coordinator. It's Josh McDaniels. Who understands Josh McDaniels' protection plan better than David Andrews? Maybe it's the aforementioned Dante Scarnecchia. He might be the one guy who understands it better than David Andrews. And so there would be real value not only in having Andrews on the field, but just having him around the facility, having him around his new teammates and people that aren't as familiar with this system to help them understand it. I mean, he was a part-time coach toward the tail end of his career here anyway. Let that continue and reap the benefits of that. And then there's the factor of, for a player like Andrews and what he's accomplished and what he's given to the organization, if he wants to come back and he wants to give it a go to see if the shoulder can hold up, the shoulder injury that ended his season and had to be surgically repaired. If it's right, having the opportunity to go and win and compete for and potentially win that job. If it were me, and I've never sat in that seat, right? So it's easy for me to say, right? But if it were me, I would be very willing, new coaching staff or not, understanding the guy's career from afar and what he's meant to the team, I'd be willing to give him that opportunity if that's what he wanted. Okay, so you've got the intangibles portion of it, you've got the X's and O's portion of it, and the scheme portion of it, and the familiarity there, and then you've just got everything that he's given to you. What's the rush? That's a question for me. If I'm looking at it from that angle, he's not killing your cap, and it's not like you've got an obvious answer at the position anyway. So why make this move now? If the odds are, even if you feel like the odds are, you might end up parting ways with him at the end of training camp, well, just let those odds play out and see how it goes. Because, in my opinion, your locker room and your roster and your talent in the offensive line room, none of those things are better after the Andrews release. So that's that side of it. The other side is the team side. And let's try to genuinely understand it from their vantage point. Because Mike Vrabel's not dying to cut people. He's not dying to fire a guy who's played in the league 10 years. You don't think Mike Vrabel from afar has had an incredible amount of respect for what David Andrews has been able to accomplish? Come on. So this is not an enjoyable part of the job for him. So why do it? To me, there are a couple things, and just to make clear the mechanics of this, even though this was announced on Thursday, Andrews was informed of the team's plans to release him well before that date and before the start of the NFL's legal tampering period. That's what I know. And so Mike Vrabel, Robert Kraft, they call David Andrews and they inform him of the decision to let him go. And you could argue, hey, maybe they tried to do him a solid because they wanted him to be able to go and find another gig if he really wanted to play. The guy's been in one place for a really long time. He's obviously closer to the end than the beginning, given his age and his injury situation. You probably knew when you made that call, odds were he wasn't going to be playing anywhere else, and that this was going to, in all likelihood, end his career. They had to have that kind of understanding before making that decision. So why make it, and why make it now? I know the Patriots made a play for Drew Dahlman, who was the best free agent center on the market, which tells you that obviously they weren't just looking at tackles like Morgan Moses or Ronnie Stanley, who they did make a hard push for before he opted to re-sign with the Ravens. And yes, they were able to let it be known in their own way how far they might be willing to go to get him. So it wasn't just tackles. They've been after guards. They've been after centers. They were looking to buy a new offensive line this year. Outside of Mike Owenu, who the team is still committing a lot of money to, they were looking for help at basically every other spot. And so if you're interested in a player like Drew Dalman, who ended up signing with the Bears, that does make things complicated with David Andrews and how you decide to handle him. Because even if you're not able to sign Dalman, and they weren't, obviously, if you're making that call and you're making him a real offer, now you have widened the circle of individuals who know you are ready to move on from David Andrews. You are necessarily, by willing to commit the kinds of dollars that Dalman would have needed in free agency to sign with you, you would have necessarily needed to already tell yourselves that you're willing and ready and able to move on from David Andrews. Because again, you make that call to Dalman, and Dalman looks at your roster and says, well, you guys still have David Andrews over there. Are you really going to go into those conversations without having had the hard conversation with Andrews first? Because if you don't, you're telling Dalman, hey, don't worry about it. He doesn't know this yet, but he's not in our plans anymore. Not the right thing to do, obviously. And if you don't have that conversation with Andrews and you end up signing Dalman, well, now you've already let him know your plans without having the hard conversation. Because if you signed Dalman to what Dalman needed to be signed in the teens of millions of dollars, Andrews was on the books for significantly less than that, right? So as soon as you make that signing official with Dalman, the writing's on the wall for Andrews. There's no competition at that point. If you have someone who's basically making twice of what the other player is making, the player who's making the smaller amount is not going to be given the opportunity to compete for his job. There is no competition. So you would have been demoting, firing, etc., Andrews without even telling him or informing him. So if you're Mike Vrabel, you're Ryan Cowden, you're Elliott Wolf, you're this Patriots front office right now, you're looking at Andrews and you're probably saying to yourselves, can we go into 2025 depending on him to be our week-to-week starter at center? The answer to that, obviously, based on their decision, was no. And so once you get to that point, do you do what I suggested earlier was the quote-unquote respectful thing to do and allow him to compete for his job? Or do you try to protect the team, in Mike Vrabel's terms, and sign a more, in your eyes at least, dependable option, a healthier option, maybe a younger option, and move on? Because if you bring Andrews back and his obvious replacement is already on the roster, that to me is a problem. It's probably a problem in the locker room where there are a ton of guys that still have a ton of respect for David Andrews, where he was a captain for as long as he was, because he's not going to be given the chance to win his job. He's just not. That's the reality of the NFL. You got a younger, healthy, more expensive option there. That guy's going to be the one who's playing. Now, what makes this tough for, I think, for Patriots fans to wrap their heads around is that option isn't on the roster. They didn't get Dalman. But I think from Vrabel's standpoint, from the team's standpoint, as soon as you make a play for a player like that, you have to inform the other guy of your plans. That's what they did with Andrews. That's why you get the release. Now, could it have been carried out differently in terms of, well, when do we let him know and how do we let him know? You know, to me, that's an in-person conversation, right? And I don't know what the mechanics of it were necessarily that led to it not being in person, but it wasn't. And that's the NFL. It's often not going to work out the way you want it to, and there's no great way. I heard my friend Scott Zolak say this week, there's no great way to find out that you've been released. So that's where we are. On the one hand, you can question it because I don't know what the next option is, and it might be nice, even if he's working his way back from injury and he's into his 30s now, it might be nice to have that option on the roster right now, a guy who knows the offense, because I don't know who's playing center for you in 2025. On the other, as soon as you make that call that you feel like you need something more dependable at that position, I don't begrudge the Patriots from making the hard decision and making it with some alacrity. Because the last thing you want to do is passive-aggressively force a guy into retirement by hiring his replacement who's obviously going to get the job. So you try to see it from both sides. You try to play it as fairly as possible, but there is no question when it comes to David Andrews. The ultimate Patriot, everything you want, everything Mike Vrabel wants now from an intangible standpoint. Leader, culture changer, work ethic through the roof, blue collar, tough as you know what. And his story is the kind of story as a parent who's starting to get his kids into the sports world that you would love to share and promote and to hold up as an example of what you can do if you put in the work, if you treat your job as seriously and with as much passion as somebody like David Andrews did, to be able to get yourself, first of all, to Georgia, right? And as a major contributor for a major program, and to even put yourself in the spot where you can be at a pro day to have a Bill Belichick show up. And to even put yourself in the spot, not to get drafted, but to get interest as an undrafted rookie. And then to grind away and make the team and beat out the starter who was drafted in the 4th round the year before, 2 years before. No, the year before. And Brian Stork. And to continue to wrestle away that starting all-important gig where your hand is on the football in every single offensive play from anybody else who had ideas of snatching it from you for a long, long time. One of the most admirable careers, honestly, of anybody that I've covered. He's really in that class as somebody who started covering this team in 2011. So, in my opinion, a Patriots Hall of Famer. I'm fortunate enough to be part of that committee that gets to, help decide who the finalists are for the fans to then vote on. And David Andrews is going to be somebody, as soon as he's eligible, that I'm supporting to be in that conversation and to be eligible to be an option for the fans to put into the Patriots Hall of Fame. It's a long list, a lot of deserving guys to go in there, but he's one of them. All right, we're going to go much quicker through these next few questions in the mailbag here, okay? USA K9 says, releasing Andrews seems to leave a gap. Is there someone on the roster they feel comfortable with? Is Andrews physically done? To answer the second one first, I don't know if that is a certainty one way or the other, but I have heard from someone close to Andrews who suggested that that is not the case, that he could play, that the shoulder has responded relatively well, and that he could play. In terms of is there somebody on the roster they feel comfortable with, I don't think so, because otherwise they wouldn't have been in on Dahlman. I don't think it's Cole Strange. That is still a very new project, and this is a new now coaching staff coming in and watching him from afar that's not as invested in him as maybe the previous regime was. As somebody that you looked at and, well, it's a first-round pick, and, we got to get talent in here. He's missed a lot of time, and, we're not sure what his best position fit is. So I'm not saying he's going to be off the team, but I don't think they would feel, quote-unquote, comfortable having him play center. Jake Andrews, same conversation. So much injury, so little time on the field. I don't know how you could feel comfortable with him playing that incredibly important position. So the answer to that, Ben Brown, he's on the list as well. My guess is he would get first crack at it based on who's on the roster right now. But again, comfortable, that's not a word I'm comfortable using for anybody on the roster right now in terms of the Patriots' feelings on their ability to be the starting center. Jim Gilhooly, 1957, says, are the Patriots confident in a second-year leap for Polk and Baker? Again, there's that word confident again. I would say no. Nick Shank asks, are Polk and Baker both on the team come September? Good question. Right now, this is just me guessing. This is like sort of an over-under of sorts. I'm not saying that I've heard this from anyone, but if I had to bet right now, I would say Polk's on the roster and Baker's not. At the Wahoo says, not a peep this offseason about Polk and Baker. Why? Because I think the short answer to that is there isn't a whole lot that's being expected from them at this stage, given what they showed last year as rookies. And the Polk one, to me, the Baker one is kind of obvious and sort of a separate conversation based on a lot that happened last year. Not dependable, missing curfew, can't get on the field in a really desperate sort of situation at that position because they can't get him to do the right things. They don't feel confident that he's going to be in the right spot at the right time and get aligned correctly, as one coach told me midseason. So they had a lot of work to do with Javon Baker, and Javon Baker didn't do enough on his own to be given the trust required to be a regular contributor, even with the situation as dire as it was at that position in New England last year. There's Baker. Polk lost his confidence clearly and wasn't able to get it back and was not the kind of personality that the Patriots thought they were getting when they drafted him in the second round. They knew what his skill set was, and they knew that it was not that of a true number one receiver. What they believed was that they were getting someone who might be able to withstand the rigors and the disappointments of being a rookie in the NFL better than Jalen Polk did. Can he get back on the right track in his second year? You totally have to leave the door open for that. I would never say never. But again, you're also not going to be gifted a role, and you're not going to be gifted targets by dint of your draft status. Even if Elliott Wolf is still here and he's the one who spent the second round pick on you. Not going to work that way. It didn't work that way for the last regime. Jalen Polk was a healthy scratch, essentially, at points last season. I say essentially because there were games where he was in uniform and either not used or barely used. Pretty rare. So second year leap, not a peep this offseason about these guys. You can't depend on them. Call it what it is. If you were, you'd be doing the team a disservice. If they end up being something, then that's great. Give them the opportunity to do it. Maybe they will be able to do it again. Would never rule it out. Not saying, people should quit on these guys. But when you saw as little as you did from them a season ago, I'm not sure why there would be peeps about either of them, quite frankly. Jim Legary or Jim Leger. Realistic free agent wide receiver options if Kupp is off the table. Also, if Hunter is available in April's draft, is he the guy? If Hunter's there or Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, I think almost no matter what your roster looks like, even if you're still without a left tackle, even say it's Abdul Carter there, you're still without a number one receiver, I think you're taking one of those two guys. They're too good. They are in a tier above everybody else. Period. End of story. Realistic free agent receiver options if Kupp was off the table. I don't think there are any that are going to give you number two kind of upside. You might be able to find that via trade. I'll continue to throw Jacoby Myers' name out there. Josh McDaniels likes him. The Patriots like him. Can they get him? Do the Raiders want to trade him? What would it cost? Looks like they're trying to win games there. They just got a quarterback in Geno Smith, and so maybe he's not available. But, free agent options, you're talking about Stephon Diggs. You're talking about Amari Cooper. One is coming off an injury, and you're not sure when you're going to have him, fully up and running. One is, from people that I've spoken to who have worked with him, considered essentially physically done in Amari Cooper. And so I don't really see a lot of high upside free agent options out there available for the Patriots right now. Keenan Allen would be a no. Not somebody who was helpful in terms of a young quarterback's development last year. Not sure that's something they're going to want to invite with their own young quarterback here in New England. Deontay Johnson has been a problem wherever he's been, seemingly, just in terms of the dependability and the attitude there, I would say not a fit. Tyler Lockett is interesting, although, he's 33, and where is he from a physical standpoint in terms of the intangible stuff that we're talking about? Yeah, he would be a fit. Brandon Cooks is an interesting name that we talked about on 98.5 The Sports Hub today on the midday show, and would be somebody I would consider. He's 32 years old. Where is he physically? He's probably not going to cost you a whole lot. And I think he is still one of these guys who, obviously he has experience with Josh McDaniels, but he is still one of these guys where I think he's still fast enough that he would pose a threat that not many others on your roster would. And so, those are names worth kicking around right now. But I would be looking trade, and I'd be looking at options that you feel like could come in and be the professional that you're looking for them to be and give you something of it. They've got enough threes, right? They have Pop Douglas. They have Mac Hollins. They have Kayshon Boutte. Those are good players to have in a receiver room. Maybe Pop Douglas has 2 upside. He's small. He is what he is from a physical standpoint. I think they need a 1 and a 2. So I'd be trying to get that veteran 2, whether it's Kupp or Myers or somebody else, and then hoping there's a way to find a 1. Is Brandon Ayuk that guy? I don't know. I can just tell you I had one executive suggest his name to me as people the Patriots could be interested in terms of adding to that receiver room if they were to miss out on a Chris Godwin in free agency. So Ayuk's coming off an injury. He's really expensive. Does he still have 1 upside? What is his personality fit? How much does he want to practice? How does the knee look after tearing it up this past year in San Francisco? These are all things you got to try to find out. He didn't want to be here a year ago. So the Patriots offered him more money than the Niners did, and he still said no because he just wanted to stay out west, which you could understand. But the situation's different now. He did get his contract. He did get paid. He's coming off an injury. His options, if he's forced to do something like get traded to another team, he didn't really have a lot of say in the matter. And because he already got his money, maybe he's more willing to come here now than he would have been previously. And the situation's changed here too, right? You have a quarterback in Drake May who has a lot of promise. You have a different head coach who's more established that maybe you've admired from afar. I don't know if you're Brandon Ayuk, but those are the names I would be thinking about. Ryan Kelleher says, behind Kupp, who do you want to target as realistic wide receivers? Patriot Mayday, is there a player like Pickens or Madison that can be had in a trade? Ooh, George Pickens, again, not a fit from a personality standpoint. That one would be a stunner to me if the Patriots ended up making a move there. Alexander Madison, I think, is who you're referring to, is a running back. Not a big need right now. In your estimation, says K. Jaramillo, do you see anything regarding any sort of trade for anybody? We mentioned Ayuk before. Seems like this team is more interested in keeping picks in a historically terrible draft than acquiring talent. I don't blame them for keeping picks. It's not a good draft in terms of high-end talent. It is deep at some positions. And so if you're able to hold on to a 3rd rounder or a 4th rounder, and you can get one of these tight ends who's considered pretty good in a really deep tight end draft, or a running back who represents the future for you as Ramondre Stevenson goes into his 5th season, don't knock the picks. This is the Next Pats podcast. You're not going to get me to knock the value of a draft pick. K. Jaramillo. George Orwell, obviously big-time listener. Thank you, George. Phil, is this team ever going to bring in a legitimate number 1 wide receiver? They seemingly miss on every FA target like Ridley and Godwin, and they either can't execute or refuse to engage on the trade market for players like Ayuk or Metcalf. They did not make Seattle a trade offer for Metcalf. Again, football character fit is a factor, right? And then what you have to pay that person after the fact. So let's not lose sight of that part of the equation either. And we're going to talk about Cam Robinson in a little bit here, but he's relevant to this kind of discussion. Not all your players can be Boy Scouts. They can't all be, Morgan Moses, Robert Spillane, right, from a intangible standpoint. But I think what Mike Vrabel wants to be careful about is adding a player who doesn't fit the intangible mold that you're looking for and paying him on top of it, because what it says to the rest of the locker room. If you've got a guy that you're not so sure about personality-wise, character-wise, football character-wise, and he's on a 1-year deal for $5 million, maybe that's a gamble worth taking for you, especially if it fills a position of need and you are to some degree desperate. But you're paying that guy $20 million for the next 3 years, now that's a real problem, because now that's who you are as an organization, no matter what you say. And you almost look hypocritical for it at this point. They've been so out front in terms of the kinds of human beings that they want. And so Laramie Tunsil, to me, is a good example. What they did in opting not to trade for Laramie Tunsil, because they knew he was available, and yes, they considered it. He's 30 years old. He's a Pro Bowl level tackle. He'd make them better. He would be an upgrade. There's no question on the field for them. But he's not the kind of player that they want. From a practice habits standpoint, from a work ethic standpoint, from a on the field, on your P's and Q's standpoint, he had 19 penalties last year. So if you were to trade for him and pay him $3.5 million for one season, yeah, he might be willing to do that. But for the amount of money that he has still left on his contract for multiple years, then it becomes a problem. So you don't. So it's not that they're not looking for talent. It's not like they're not looking for receivers. They offered Chris Godwin a boatload because he checks both boxes. He's a talented receiver. He's still in his 20s. Sorry, all 3 boxes. 1, 2, and 3. I can count. The third box is that intangible box. He's allegedly and I've never been around him, but he's supposedly a fantastic teammate, worker, leader, etc. So that's why you have that huge offer go out to him. Olive B says, are we ever getting a wide receiver? And Jesus Yeshua, Phil, what trades can the Patriots make to get a stud left tackle and a stud wide receiver? You can't trade for a stud left tackle, generally speaking, unless a team like Houston's looking to get rid of a guy because he's not a culture fit for them either. That's an important conversation to have. When somebody like Tunsil, who becomes available, we should be asking, why? Huh? Because you can make it work. We've all seen you can make the money work. The cap relief, shrug your shoulders at the cap relief conversation. That ain't it. They got a young quarterback who is not yet on a big money deal. They are ready to win right now. They have a good roster in a not great division, and they just traded a 30-year-old left tackle with Pro Bowl ability. Why? Why? Why do you think? It's because of that reputation that he carries when it comes to those things I mentioned earlier, that intangible stuff. Probably not what they're looking for. Washington, in a little bit different spot, maybe. Maybe they feel like, okay, we are sniffing a Super Bowl, whereas Houston still sees themselves as a year or two away. We're still building towards something. We still want to make sure we're about the right. If Washington looks at it and says, we're a player away, we'll gladly take them on. We feel like our culture is really strong. We didn't just have a down year the way Houston did. We just made a push to the Super Bowl with a good young quarterback and a new coach, but an experienced coach. We can handle it. Well, give us that guy. And if he doesn't want to practice, he doesn't want to practice. We'll ride his ass all the way to the NFC Championship game again. Different strokes, right? For different organizations, depending on where you're at. But trading for a stud left tackle, in my opinion, ain't happening. A stud wide receiver, in my opinion, ain't happening. The best you're going to get right now is a 2. Or an injured 1 ? Still 1? In Brandon Ayuk. And that's why I bring it up. The talent, when he's healthy, might be such that you'd be willing to take the gamble. But are you willing to pay? And how much are you willing to give up in a trade? There's a sliding scale there for what this organization is going to want to do under Mike Vrabel. Curmudgeon Mike. We gotta wrap this thing up. Agree or disagree? Let's say the Patriots don't add more free agents and they draft Hunter with the number 4 pick. That alone is worth a 5-win increase over the last year. Boy. I hope you're not saying Hunter alone. Hunter alone is not worth 5 wins. Are you saying Drake May going into year 2 and the experience that comes with that, plus Mike Vrabel, plus Josh McDaniels, plus the free agents that they've already signed, plus Hunter? Is 5 wins better? That, to me, is more realistic, and that's probably what you're saying. I still would say that's on the strong end. I think it's within the realm of possibility for sure. It's within the range of realistic outcomes. But I'm probably more comfortable saying 7-ish. Like, right? What's the over-under on wins if they add Hunter on top of everything they've already done? 7.5? 6.5? To me, the goal is to play meaningful football Christmas week. If you're still in the hunt, quote unquote, you're on that graphic, Fox Sports, CBS, NBC, Peacock, in the hunt for a playoff spot. If you're in the hunt at Christmas, that to me is a successful season. You could lose out from there and end up a 7-win team, and you end up 7-10. You could end up 9-8 and out of the playoffs. You could end up 9-8 and in the playoffs. You could be 8-9 and out. Like, play meaningful football Christmas week. Be in it when Christmas comes around. That to me is what you're hoping for, and Hunter would help them in that regard. To me, he's the best player in the draft. H.V. Barry says, why do the Patriots hate offense? MDH0176 says, seems like this offseason is the tale that's old as time with the Patriots. Get defense and free agency. Leave the offense to figure it out. What's the plan to help May? Ben Johnson loaded up on the O-line to protect Williams. Patriots don't seem to be in a rush to help May. Let me say this to everyone out there, because I've heard it. I've heard it on the radio. I've heard it on TV. Well, clearly Mike Vrabel's prioritizing the defense here. Why is Mike Vrabel not doing anything to help the offense? They didn't go into free agency prioritizing the defense. They went into free agency knowing they had countless holes to fill and a lot of money to spend. And so they were ready to pivot, to use their word. They were, and I think they proved it to some degree in almost losing Milton Williams, but realizing that, well, we lost out on Chris Godwin. We had money earmarked for him. We had money earmarked for Ronnie Stanley. Let's throw a little bit more at Milton and see if we can get him. Let's go get a corner. Second corner isn't our top need by any stretch. They know their top needs are left tackle and number 1 wide receiver. And yet, they don't have them. They had the best offer. What I heard was the Patriots had the best offer for Chris Godwin, and that has since been reported even further by Adam Schefter, saying $28, $29, $30 million a year potentially is what they offered, which is a wild amount of money for somebody who's coming off a dislocated ankle. But that's how badly they wanted Chris Godwin. So were they prioritizing? He was going to be their most highly paid free agent if they got him. So were they prioritizing defense, or are they just looking to aggressively fill all the holes that they can, and they just can't coax some of these players away from the cities they've been in for years, in Ronnie Stanley and Chris Godwin? So don't take their defensive additions to mean that Vrabel's ignoring the offense. It's not for a lack of trying. Now, can you criticize not going after a Joe Thuney? Yes, you can. Can you criticize not landing and going the extra mile for a Drew Dahlman when you knew you were going to be moving on from David Andrews? Sure. But I think to say that they're ignoring the offense isn't true. They just haven't been able to land those guys. And some of them they have made serious, significant pushes for. Kozvechkin says, I'm greedy, Phil. Patriots had a strong first day of free agency, but I yearn for more. Please, pretty please, with sugar on top. Look into your crystal ball of football knowledge and tell me what's next for this football team. I would say, in terms of significant moves, right? We're not going to talk about, no offense, Marcus Epps, K'Lavon Chaisson, Wes Schweitzer. We're not going to do that on the podcast today. But those are all recent signings by the Patriots. Those are guys that are depth pieces, given the contracts that they're going to sign. So that the next significant move to me has to be tackle. I really think they would like to not have to be forced to take a left tackle with that 4th overall pick or somewhere in the first round and just be forced into it because they don't have one. So who is that? Is it Cam Robinson? Again, does the personality fit? Does the play style fit? Where is he at with an injury? He played banged up last year, and he gave up 21 pressures in his last 2 weeks. Up and down over the course of his career. Never really lived up to the potential that he had coming out of college. He played for Doug Marrone. So, they've got familiarity there, which a lot of these signings, they've got familiarity with these guys based on coaches that are on the staff. Same is true for Cam Robinson. The thing about familiarity is that can go both ways. It can be a good and a bad thing for the player. So is Doug Marrone banging down Mike Vrabel's door and Elliott Wolf's door to say, we got to go sign this guy because I need a left tackle, damn it, and I spent time with him and I know he can do the job? Or is he saying, no, let's take our time there. Yeah, you guys are probably doing the right thing. Let's wait this out. Let's see if that number comes down a little more. Talking about that sliding scale. Because is he workable? Yeah. Is he workable at Dan Moore Jr. numbers in terms of what he just got paid? Is he workable at Ronnie Stanley numbers in terms of what he just got paid? No. So, where does that leave you? Leaves you playing the waiting game. But tackle to me has to be what comes next. If I had to guess, it wouldn't be Cooper Kupp, but let's keep an eye on that trade market, whether it's Jacoby Myers or somebody else at the receiver position. Paul Vozella1 says, are the answers to any/all of left tackle, left guard, and center already on the roster? Left guard, maybe. Layden Robinson played there by the end of the year. Did they think he has a chance, right? Elliott Wolf spent a draft pick on him. He still has a significant role in the organization. Does he talk Mike Vrabel into saying, yes, that can be our guy for this coming year? I don't know. Left tackle, I would say no. Center, I would say no. Although, again, Cole Strange, Ben Brown, Wes Schweitzer, Jake Andrews, can somebody out of that group play center? Or is that going to be a position that they get in the draft? They're just going to find a smart guy in the draft. How about Drew Kendall out of BC? We talk about Ozzie Trapillo all the time in this podcast. Let's throw Drew Kendall some love. Son of Pete Kendall. Long-time NFL offensive lineman. One of our favorite guests on the Patriots Talk podcast. Incredibly smart guy. We've had him on the pod before. And so, Drew, tough, smart, good athlete. Was a little banged up during the pre-draft process, is my understanding. Still ran a damn good time at the Combine this year. And if he continues to heal up, PC's Pro Day, I'm really interested to see what some of those numbers look like. And where does he end up going in the draft? Is that the kind of player you're interested in now that you're looking for a center? I don't know, but it could be the draft. The draft could be the answer at that spot. R. Tyrannus says, what's the future Cole Strange? Reading that left guard and center is a need, but doesn't seem like he's in play for either. He's just missed so much time. I think you give him a chance to establish himself, but I don't think you hand him anything. At return of Andrew, do people in the building actually think Cole Strange could be an NFL caliber center? Or is it just a haymaker attempt to see if he can avoid being a bust? And then at Patrick Rollo, does releasing Andrews and Strange's versatility make Strange a little more valuable to them? He catches so much flack, but except for when he was injured, he played well and now can snap. I'm not sure the view of Cole Strange in the building is that of definite starting caliber center. This is something they're going to need to figure out, and I would say not the same degree, but sort of same categories as Jalen Polk. You don't just get rid of him because you're not sure. You give him a chance, see what he can do, but you also don't write his name down in permanent marker either for any of these starting spots. I don't think they can be in that situation right now, especially with a guy who's missed as much time as Cole, unfortunately for him, has. At Chuck L, 1960, worst case scenario, they can't get the left tackle spot filled. Phil, you've seen plenty of Adarian Lowe practice and play. Is there any way that he can work as a stopgap for a season with edge help and coaching? I want to be careful when I say this, but Brian Hoyer told us during the pre-draft process last spring that you can figure it out with one tackle who is not necessarily up to snuff from a talent standpoint because you can help him. Chip him, running backs, tight ends, scheme, all of those things can help hide a player at that position. And I'll say this for Adarian Lowe. He was banged up last year, and it doesn't excuse the penalties. And I think even when he's healthy, he's not what you want as a week in, week out starter at left tackle. Okay? Can he be better than he was last year? I think he can be. Still, is that what you want? No, and they still need help there. Let's put it that way. Can you get by if you're Josh McDaniels? We'll see. I hesitate to compare him to anyone at all because these guys ended up having real careers. But I look at somebody like Ladrian Waddle, Cam Fleming. I think these are guys that Josh McDaniels had as starters at times for stretches of time, and they looked okay. Now, Dante Scarnecchia was there for those guys as well, and was a huge part of why they were able to play and last the way they did without torpedoing the offense. I think, let's wait and see what they have in terms of a coach in Doug Marrone and what Josh McDaniels can do. If you're forced to have a Darian Lowe at left tackle, though, that's not what they're hoping for. At Boston Angeles. Best trade candidate for left tackle? I'll have to get back to you on that one. Left tackle, starting caliber left tackles, guys, don't move. However, with the Niners selling off pieces, asks B. Cast in 34, why not call on Trent Williams? Sure, call. Again, they generally speaking don't move, and they're going to want to protect their soon-to-be $55, $60 million a year man and Brock Purdy. Unbelievable, mind-blowing stuff there. Not a contract I would do, but looks like they're about to do in San Francisco. Do you want to rip Deebo Samuel away from him, maybe Brandon Ayuk away from him, George Kittle? How much longer does he have? And then you're going to trade away Trent Williams too? Good luck, Brock Purdy. You just went from having maybe the best situation in sports in terms of a supporting cast to one of the worst. I don't think they can do all that to him in San Francisco. But make the call. Hell yeah, B. Caston. At Garth Corriveau, hearing Patriots will pursue potential wide receiver 1 trades. Higgins, Ayuk, A.J. Brown. Higgins to me is really hard. I still haven't heard anyone, and I cover the league. I should be able to figure this out. But I tweeted something the other day that was tweeted out by Football Ops. When you get that non-exclusive tag, it allows the player to negotiate with other teams. If the Bengals choose not to match and Higgins signs a deal with another team, the Bengals get 2 first-round picks. Now, the mechanic in there that to me is still a little hazy is, okay, but he could still be traded before he negotiates with another team, and that's where maybe the trade compensation comes down. Would they be willing to do that? Or would they just tell him, go find your deal with your next team because we want those 2 first-round picks? Or would they be willing to let him go for less than that because... Why? Because they know it's going to facilitate a trade and they know they can't get a long-term deal done with him anyway, and so they'd rather have a second, for instance, versus nothing at all. And they're not going to force the 2 first-round pick thing. I guess that's the scenario that could play out, and that's what you might be hoping for if you're the Patriots. I'm just not sure it's realistic, and even as we're potting right now, Adam Schefter's reporting that the Bengals are getting close on deals with both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So that could be a lot of money in one fell swoop for Cincinnati. Would you rather have Tet or Tyler Warren, says Zachary GR? I'd rather have Tyler Warren right now. And I know that's not a position in need. I just think he could be a really, really good player at a position that I think is undervalued in the NFL. And Ted McMillan looks like a really smooth, sure-handed, well-coordinated offensive weapon. I just worry a little bit about the contested catch thing. I worry a little bit about that. We've just seen that movie before here in New England, and it hasn't worked. Optimus Tech. Who else are they going to sign for the offensive line? We mentioned Cam Robinson. I would be a proponent of signing Tyron Smith, given your situation right now. He is old. He's banged up. Neck, back, knee, ankle. Scary. Played 10 games last year, but when he's on the field, he's really good. And so I would take 10 games of Tyron Smith over 13 of Cam Robinson. If it's 17 of Cam Robinson versus 10 or 12 of Tyron Smith, then maybe it's a conversation. I just think Tyron Smith, it's an obvious Band-Aid, and it keeps you in the market for left tackles moving forward, whether it's trade, free agency, draft, otherwise. But you need a stopgap at the very least. And to me, he's the better player than Cam Robinson, even if Cam Robinson might get the better deal because he's younger and he's been healthier. Mark Reads Comics says, after reading the graphic in the Super Bowl in regards to Philly's massive offensive line, why not beef up the middle and sign Mekhi Becton for left guard? North of Boston says, need Mekhi Becton here. Are they going after Mekhi Becton? Again, I think you have to wonder about the personality fit, guys. I'm sorry. There's just he was an issue in New York. There's a reason he hasn't lived up to his reputation at tackle. He got some great coaching in Philly. He was playing for a contract in Philly, and he had a great year, and he won a Super Bowl. Fantastic story, and good for him. He also played right guard in Philly. You need a left guard. So even if you want to keep him at guard, not tackle, you kind of need the other spot, and can he do it? I don't know. Maybe he can. He's a good athlete for somebody his size especially. And, massive people up front. You got Morgan Moses and Michael Wenu already. If you get Mekhi Becton at his best, with a center to be named later, and whether it's Will Campbell or Cam Robinson, who's a big human himself, Tyron Smith is a massive human. Like, I like that idea with Josh McDaniels' downhill run scheme. Yes. But they would have to be okay with the football character there for Becton and how he would respond after getting a new contract. Boom, 8517 says, tired of all the negativity. Aren't we all? Boom. Play devil's advocate and give me the case for why the O-line, as currently stated, will be better next year, appreciably so, barring major injuries. As I see it, all 5 positions should be better than last year, without a doubt, barring injury, especially right guard and right tackle. Boom. I guess you just don't even know who's playing, though. Right? I guess you could say, well, Vadarian Lowe is going to be healthier, and if he's your left tackle, like, he'll be better. Or you could say at the very least they're going to draft Will Campbell if they still have a need there, and that'll be better. That's true. Layden Robinson going into year 2, he's got to be better. Center, I guess your argument is anybody's better than Ben Brown. What if it's Ben Brown who's back playing center? Like, then it's status quo. So that's strong. They have 2 starters on the offensive line, and they need a lot of help. I am tired of the negativity also, Boom, but hard to say that they are appreciably better on the offensive line as opposed to last year. I wouldn't say that. C. Nolan, 1976. Are we underestimating Jake Andrews? No, I don't think we are estimating Jake Andrews. There's no estimation. I feel like he proved he can play in this league during his rookie year. Then he did not. He did not. He didn't play. He didn't play in the regular season. So did you watch him at training camp and you thought he could hold up? That's not the NFL. Proving yourself means seeing him in regular season action and trusting that he can do it. And he's missed a lot of time lately. And it's really hard to miss as much time as he's missed and come back and be a difference maker. How is Jake Andrews viewed inside the organization, says Quality Smoke? Again, put him in the same bucket, but even less so just because he doesn't have the experience as somebody like a Cole Strange. You can't depend on him to take on one of these jobs. Keep him on the roster if you like him and you like what his college tape showed you, and allow him to have some opportunities. Don't just shun him and say goodbye forever if you feel like he can play. That would be silly. But you're not penciling him in for one of these starting spots. So that it feels almost a little bit like talking about baseball prospects right now. Although the Red Sox prospects right now are very legit, so I shouldn't even bring up that example. But you know what I'm talking about. The Phil Plantiers is a fellow Phil and a guy I met and really liked as a little kid. Gave me a great autograph and had a great interaction. I can still remember to this day. I think I was 6 years old. But he's sort of like the prototype, right, of just like overhyping a young player. Let's not get into that category with some of these young Patriots linemen. We know they're desperate. They need help. The gem in all likelihood is not already on the roster. Pisano Redneck. Is it feasible to imagine that they enter the draft with the current roster and not take Campbell at 4? It is. Here's what I would do, though. And let's continue to read some questions because these are similar. How do the Patriots solve their glaring holes in the offensive line and still spend their first-round pick wisely without reaching for a presumed guard? I am terrified about the fact that I only feel comfortable with 2/5 of the offensive line right now. It is scary, Mark. That was Mark Paskey. Irish Norse Pat. Assuming the Patriots will draft Will Campbell, what does the starting O-line look like? And at Seth Jarek, what does the draft look like after these signings? Great questions all. With Will Campbell, I think it should be Will Campbell, Layden Robinson, Ben Brown, and/or Cole Strange, Mike Owenu, Morgan Moses. I'd play Will Campbell left tackle. Again, the arm length thing to me is not going to be a prohibitive quality of his length, because it is not a prohibitive quality for Dante Scarnecchia, and who am I to argue with Dante Scarnecchia? It is feasible, though, to imagine that they enter the draft with the current roster and not take Will Campbell. If Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter are there, I think they're going to take him, even if they don't have an obvious left tackle right now. What you then might have to do, though, on night one of the draft is trade up from 38 and into the back end of the first round and get yourself a Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, or get yourself an Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota. One of these later in the first round tackles. Josh Connerly, is he late in the first round out of Oregon? Like, can you swing a trade for one of these guys and make them your left tackle? That's what I would be trying to do if Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter are your guys at number 4. Nick Curtin, who does the new defensive tackle Williams remind you of as a player comparison? Great question. Undersized defensive tackle, penetrating defensive tackle. We can't say Aaron Donald, because Aaron Donald's one of the best players of all time. How about like a throwback? And this was a great, great player too, and I even hesitate to compare him to this player. He's not on Aaron Donald's level. But how about John Randall? Remember John Randall? Some of the best NFL film stuff you'll ever see from John Randall, trash-talking offensive linemen and quarterbacks with the black face paint. 1990 to 2000, 10 years with the Vikings, 3 more years with the Seahawks, 6 first-team All-Pros. I mean, unbelievable. He's a Hall of Famer. So this is a lofty comparison, okay? I'd say Milton Williams is destined to have his bust in Canton someday. But I just didn't want to say Aaron Donald. And I guess I just came up with another absurdly high-end comp in John Randall. But John Randall was listed 6'1", 290. You know, Milton Williams not all that far off in terms of his measurements. You're talking about 6'3", 290. So a little longer, a little more tapered. But that's the kind of player I'm thinking of, is not a space eater defensive tackle, but a get up the field, use your athleticism, cause a lot of problems with your movement and your strength, and the combination of those two, and get into the opposing backfield. That was just fun to talk about John Randall for a second. That was really my excuse for mentioning him there. Cheech and John, does Milton get traded by the draft? Honestly, I would love to see a competition between him and May, because Milton looked really good in that one game. Come on, Cheech and John. There's not going to be a competition there. I do think there's a chance he gets traded. They just drafted Josh Dobbs. They have a backup. He's a veteran. Gives you something different from Drake May. Joe Milton's not going to, barring injury to Drake May, Joe Milton's not the future here. So you drafted him to trade him. Which is why I like the pick when they made it last year in the 6th round. If you get a 4th-round pick for Joe Milton, I think you've got to move him. You're covered there at that position now, and his value, I'm being honest here, just trying to envision moving forward. Like, is he going to really up his value based on preseason games that he plays in? The only way he ups his value is if the worst case scenario happens. Drake May gets hurt, he gets forced into action, and he gets his ass on the field, and he performs. And maybe that's why you would hold on to him. But then why'd you just sign Josh Dobbs? Milton, to me, is still a developmental player. When he was drafted, he was a developmental quarterback. He's played in one game against a bunch of backups from Buffalo in a game that they were trying to lose. Buffalo was trying to lose. Patriots were too, based on the roster decisions they made. They still weren't able to lose it. But be that as it may. Could have had Travis Hunter, probably. Be that as it may. If you get a 4th for Joe Milton, I would swing that deal. Certainly anything higher than that. 5th, 6th, then his draft stock really hasn't, you're just trading him away for essentially what you got him for in the first place. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Eric Morganti, if Hunter and Carter are off the board at 4, do you think any shot they go Tet if he runs sub 4.540? I'm not sure he's going to run a 40, Eric. I'd love to see Tet McMillan run a 40-yard dash. I don't think we're going to see it. And if he does, I'm not sure it's sub 4.5. So I just don't think he's destined to come to New England. Even if he does run sub 4.5, the argument is there to take him because it would fill a need for you. What does the offensive line look like? Have they signed one of these free agents that we're talking about? It would just be hard for me to picture Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf, who comes from a Packers tree where they just don't draft receivers in the first round, to take somebody like Ted McMillan, who's not like a bona fide, like surefire stud. He would be behind all three guys who went at the top of the draft last year, from what I've been told: Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. He'd probably be closer to Brian Thomas. But Brian Thomas was a freaky athlete and had really good size and had a really good rookie year. So I'm trying to not factor that in terms of like the draft evaluation of Thomas last year. But I think that's probably the range, like back end of the first round, where McMillan would have gone if he was in last year's draft. You want to take him at 4? I can't see it. West Biddeford, Little League. Love it. Hi, Mr. Perry. I didn't follow Vrabel much when he was in Tennessee. What's his preferred base D, and who do you think will primarily play nickel? Interesting question. Marcus Jones, preferred base D, like 3-4. Harold Landry's your classic 3-4 outside linebacker. Keon White is a good athlete on the other side. You're usually going to have sort of like your Sam and your Jack. That was like the old Belichick language, but those were your two outside linebackers often on the line of scrimmage. One guy getting up the field most often, one guy doing a little bit of both in terms of dropping and rushing the quarterback. But I think that's what you're going to see in New England under Mike Vrabel is having some classic outside linebacker types like a Harold Landry, 250-ish, sometimes even less than that. Landry was like 230 last year, 235 in Tennessee. Anthony Jennings on the other side, like to me, he's more outside linebacker than true 4-3 end. Keon White is kind of a tweener, can do a little bit of everything, but Marcus Jones is your nickel, is my guess, based on how the team looks right now, and then 3-4 base D. So that to me is probably what you're looking for. West Biddeford Little League. Good luck this spring. D. Roth, 54. We got to finish up here. This is lightning round portion of the program because it's been a long pod. I appreciate you guys for sticking. We still got Rhett Lewis at the end. How many months until Robert Spillane jerseys are on back order? Good question. Those 14s are going to, I think, fly off the shelves. That guy was electric at the podium yesterday. I was told, you can read my story on him on NBCSportsBoston.com. Huge loss for the Raiders locker room, talking to somebody with that organization. Somebody that we're going to have a lot of fun with, which you can tell already from the sound that we got from him earlier this week. He's talking about practicing with his eyes closed so he can get better spatial awareness. I can't wait to see that in training camp or OTAs, either one. I just want to see how that goes. I hope he's wearing like a clear visor, not the dark one that we've seen in some of the pictures, so we can actually maybe get a look through the binoculars at what his eyes are doing on a snap-to-snap basis. But I like the signing, and I like, everything that he appears to be when it comes to work ethic and, very similar trajectory to David Andrews, undrafted rookie, tryout guy who's turned himself into a real player, hasn't won at the level that Andrews has, and hasn't had the track record of leadership that Andrews has, but he is a beloved guy in the places that he's been. And so, you might see those Spillane jerseys fly off the shelves in the next few months. Who knows? Big Tuna says, do you hate that DBs and LBs keep taking low-end numbers? Yes, I do. I do hate this, Big Tuna. You hate it. I hate it too. And that, again, I'm not, that's no shot at Robert Spillane, but 14 on a linebacker. I think Harold Landry's wearing 2 this year, I heard. I don't love it. As somebody who just, while you're watching the game, I'm just programmed. If you're of a certain age, you're programmed to see certain numbers and expect to see certain positions. So when I see a linebacker running around at 14, it's just still, at this point, even though we're years into this number change thing, it's going to take me a while to understand that, yeah, that guy is somebody who should be wearing something in the 50s, but he's wearing 14. So no, it's not a safety or a receiver or a quarterback. Like, that's a receiver quarterback number, 14. That's a linebacker now. So we all just got to start to compute that. I feel like Tom Brady a little bit. Remember Tom Brady used to complain about this because he was like talking about having trouble identifying guys, and I'm with him. But I guess neither Tom Brady nor I are important enough to get that rule reversed. E.R. Johnson 1. Any update on Barmore? I wish I had one. All's quiet on that front. And so we'll see. I think they just don't want to make any promises that they can't keep with something that is in some ways unpredictable. And so you hope he's out there and able to play. Milton Williams next to Christian Barmore would be a lot of fun to watch. Milton Williams next to Jalen Carter, a lot of fun to watch in Philly. And Barmore's not that level player probably, but he's in that vein in terms of his style and his size. And so, that's what you have to be hoping for if you're a Patriots fan, that he can somehow work his way back. I wish I had more intel for you. At 75 Franklin, what is your over-under today? Maybe charted after each phase in the team-building process. Oh, you're saying for wins. He's at 6 right now. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think 6.5. If they get Travis Hunter, who's my favorite player in the draft, at 4, maybe it's 7.5. Need a left tackle, need a receiver. Michael D. Coe, 95. Should the Patriots sign draft a fullback and or blocking tight end to help block for whichever left tackle they want? Yes. And not only for that, but Josh McDaniels used a fullback. Jakob Johnson, get him on the horn. He's still working out, still trying to play. Saw him at the Super Bowl. I had them in my most recent 7-round mock draft on NBCSportsBoston.com. Taking Willie Lampkin, the 5'10", 270-pound interior offensive lineman out of North Carolina, Drake May's former teammate. I had them drafting him in the 7th round. For some reason, he played well at the Senior Bowl and then wasn't invited to the Combine, probably because of his size. I disagree with that decision. Give the guy a shot. Give him a chance to meet with all these teams and perform out there on the field and see what kind of numbers he could put up, see if he could blow anybody away. Have him work out with the fullbacks if you want, or the tight ends, if that's how you see him in the NFL. But listen, if you get that guy a jersey, take him in the 7th round, get him a jersey. He's now your super sub on the interior. Sorry, Wes Schweitzer. He's your super sub on the interior potentially. And a fullback. I love the idea. I don't know. Maybe I'm taking crazy pills. Todd Rushman, what running backs do you think they're targeting? I just don't think... That was one of the surprising things about the Combine. A lot of love, I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but a lot of love for Patriots running backs. They feel like the league feels like that is one of their best positions. Corner, tight end, quarterback. He's already one of your best players. Maybe you would say safety if Duggar and Peppers, like before last season, you would have said that. They both had down years for obviously different reasons. But a lot of love for Patriots running backs. I don't know if they're targeting any, but as we get closer to the draft, we'll have some names for you. What I think would probably be nice for Josh McDaniels would sort of be to have a third down, like a true third down back kind of option, a James White type. So we'll look out for some of those as we get a little closer to the draft, Todd. At DPTP, all set. Senator, when are you running for election? We need to remove the millionaire's tax to help out the Patriots free agent pitch. There's been some really good work done on this by my friend Mark the Beetle Bertrand on 98.5 The Sports Hub. When he's factoring in the millionaire's tax, he's saying it's really not as drastic a thing as people want to make it out to be. Your base salary, obviously would be impacted in terms of the tax on that, but it's only on your games played at Gillette Stadium or in the states where there are those types of taxes, because you do get taxed based on where your games are at for your base salary. Now, again, another friend of the program, Albert Breer, said, yes, that's true. So it's 8 games, 9 games at the most, where those game checks will be altered by the millionaire's tax. However, when you're signing as a free agent, your signing bonus also gets taxed by the state that the team resides in. And so that's a big one. That's a hefty sum. You're talking whatever the numbers are. Is it 9% on what did Milton Williams? Let's get Milton Williams' contract up. Milton Williams, easy for me to say. It's been a long podcast, friends. You guys are the best. If you're around here, you're still watching. In listening, by the way, signing bonus. $24 million signing bonus. So what's, that's a couple $1 million, right? If it's 9-ish%, $2 million. It's not insignificant. It's not crazy, but it's easy for the Patriots to make up. And so I know that was sort of a jokey question, calling me senator and all that. We need to help the Patriots free agent pitch. It's not as drastic an issue as people are making it out to be. You do wonder if it gets sold as a drastic issue to agents or by agents to the players. That's what I would like to know. Like, the Patriots can easily, especially with the amount of money that they have at their disposal and cap space, et cetera, they can make up for that, like, no problem. It's like really $2 million on the signing bonus, and maybe a couple million somewhere else on the game day checks. So like his base salary, Milton Williams, just to stick with that example, his base salary is $6 million in 2025. So half his games are at home. So the Massachusetts Millionaires tax comes into play on $3 million of that $6 million base. Okay? This is a rough guesstimate. And somebody out there, we got an accountant or somebody who's going to correct me on all this. But what's the tax on that is $300,000? Is that right? 10% of $3 million? So, like, what are we talking about? Right? Okay. Again, if you're an accountant out there or you're somebody who has more intel on this kind of thing than I do, I'm happy to hear it. I can't guarantee we will address it on the pod because I don't think it's the kind of thing people really give a damn about. For further information on that, please send all of your questions, queries, et cetera, to Mark Bertrand at 98.5 The Sports Hub and Albert Breer at Sports Illustrated. Their emails and Twitter accounts are widely available to anyone who wants more on this. Last question. Good one to finish on here. At Ramsdale5, did you clap for Carlton Davis? Poor Carlton. No, I did not. Nobody did. That's not... you probably know this, Ramsdale5, if you're a fan of the podcast and you're from the area or you follow coverage in the area. Boston's not a place where the media are going to be clapping for anything in a press conference setting. That might happen in other cities, and that doesn't make those people bad people or bad at their jobs. But that's just, we're not rooting, we're not cheering, that's just, so, no. Let's play the sound, actually, of Carlton Davis. We have that, right? Skull Crusher? Let's play the sound of Carlton Davis asking for applause here.
No applause in here? Nobody clapping? No?
Yep, that's how it goes here. Sorry, Carlton. Didn't get the warm welcome you were looking for from the Patriots media. The fan base, I'm sure, thrilled to see him. We are going to, speaking of Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, Morgan Moses, anybody else they sign, Robert Spillane, we're going to be getting further into the weeds on all of these guys and what they're going to bring to the table. And so don't worry, we're going to get to that. I do think it was important today. Talk some Andrews, look ahead, because all of your questions were almost all about, like, this is the next Pats podcast. What's next? Like, they still have so much to do, right? Tell us where these moves are coming from. So I thought it was important to address all those today. But we are going to get further into what these guys are going to bring to the Patriots on the field, to their schemes, how they're going to be used by their particular coordinators, all of that stuff. We'll get more into it. I like the fit. Carlton Davis, just starting with him, like, very, very briefly. Man-to-man coverage. Some of the next-gen numbers in terms of press coverage and his ability to execute in a scheme that will utilize a lot of press coverage across from Christian Gonzalez. That, to me, could end up being a really dynamite pairing at the cornerback position. So we'll get more into Davis and others on future pods. Right now, for everyone who stuck around and waited for Rhett Lewis, here's your Rhett Lewis. I'm thrilled now to have with us on the next Pats podcast. It's Rhett Lewis, NFL Network. Yeah. He's on the Move the Six podcast. He has a draft podcast on SiriusXM NFL Radio. You're doing everything, my friend, and we so appreciate you spending some time here with us today.
This is Next Pats.
This is Next Pats.
I'm kind of like an expat.
You are
not
a little
really
bit of an expat.
Patriot, but ex-media Pat. You know what I mean?
Yes. You were once one of us.
Once.
You have now gone on to bigger
Yes.
and better
Well,
things, and your tan is vicious at
Oh,
all
is it?
times.
Nice.
I mean,
I
relative
don't know.
to
you, yeah.
Yeah,
That's,
I mean,
that's,
come
that's
on.
a thing.
That's sort of the mean where we live. Anyway,
What's
you want
next?
to talk some draft?
Okay.
Here's the thing. The Patriots have the number 4 overall pick.
I'm told.
They have a lot of needs. Rhett.
Also told.
You came storming onto our set
100%.
here with photographer extraordinaire Glenn Gleason. He said, I've got
What's up,
takes
Doc?
that will melt your face.
So much.
What should the Patriots do with the 4th overall pick?
Yeah, and by melting face, people may not feel super excited about them that way. That kind of melts your face,
Yeah.
but I think it's
You're cooling. Don't cool.
Okay,
Stay
that's not
hot
cool.
on
Let's
this.
stay hot. All right. Look, I think the Patriots have an opportunity to make one of the biggest slam dunk picks in terms of value, in terms of need, and merging all of that at the intersection of a really good player in Will Campbell. I don't think there's a whole lot of potential that you're going to see that player or another offensive lineman go in the 3 picks before the Patriots as it all currently stands right now. So when you have one of the worst offensive lines in football, the last couple seasons, let's say, let's go get the best one at that position when we have that opportunity. Now, look, you could be talking about let's play the draft piano a little bit, maybe move down and still try to get him, or just take a player that you feel like is going to sit there and upgrade your offensive line and be a pillar of your offensive line for the next 10 to 12 years. Nobody's going to care where you take them if they're a Pro Bowl player for 8 to 10 years.
You feel like he's that level player?
I think
Because
he
that, I
definitely
think, is
could
the
be.
concern for the
Yeah.
people at home is, well, yeah, he might be the best offensive lineman in this year's draft.
Right.
But if it's a not-so-good draft along the offensive line, do we really want to spend a top 5 pick on
Sure.
somebody of that caliber?
Yeah, do you want to wait and take a lesser player?
No, I think
Okay.
in a
I don't know.
perfect world,
Yeah.
the Patriots would like to address it in free agency.
Sure.
So let me run a scenario by you.
Yeah.
Say
Let's
they
do it.
are able to. I know the Ravens are talking about re-signing Ronnie Stanley.
Yeah.
But say they're able to throw a boatload of money at Ronnie Stanley and they're able to actually acquire him. And then the 4th overall pick comes around. You still might need a tackle because they kind of need 2.
I know.
So you still might need a tackle.
Yeah.
But here's the scenario.
Okay.
Let me finish. Travis Hunter's also on the board at 4 overall. Because the quarterbacks, as they seemingly always do, I don't know if it'll be the case this year, but they seemingly always rise up the board. Say 2 quarterbacks go in the top 3.
Very
Abdul
real
Carter
possibility.
goes somewhere there
Very
as
real
well.
poss- that's
and
how I
Travis
would say it
Hunter's
right now.
available.
Yeah.
And everyone considers him, seemingly everyone, considers him a blue chip talent in a draft short on those types of players. Where are you
Right.
going in that situation?
Well, I think it really depends on how the Patriots view him. Do they view him like most teams that I've talked to view him, and that is as a full-time defensive back with the potential to really contribute in ways, as a receiver on offense, or do you view him like the Browns view him as a wide receiver, which we found out this week, which I thought was kind of interesting that they said that, because it is kind of, I feel like, contrary to overall league belief and the fact that he is here at the combine as a defensive back, right? Now, if they view him as a receiver, I think I could be really intrigued there. You've got a blue chip corner in Christian Gonzalez. He's already one of the best in the league. Would you love to have another one? Sure, but I think there's a way to. And I think ultimately this comes back to, and that's part of the reason why Will Campbell was my choice there for. You got to support Drake May at all costs. Right? Make the young quarterback what you ultimately envisioned him to be, which is your franchise quarterback for the next decade plus. So what are you doing to do? And you can make the argument that a better, stronger defense will help on that too. But I still feel like if it's not Will Campbell and you view Travis Hunter as the DB, I'd go take Mason Graham. Especially now we're talking about Godshaw maybe on his way out. You want to continue to kind of build that front in the image of Mike Vrabel now. Go get a big guy on either side of the draft. That's where the strength of this draft, on either side of the line, that's where the strength of this draft is.
I love to get your perspective because you cover the entire league, you cover the entire draft,
Yes.
but you have this big picture perspective that we're not always able to get being where we
Yeah.
are. If they're able to draft Travis Hunter, do they suddenly become nationally a more interesting team? And that shouldn't matter. What should matter most is how many football games they're able to win, and then ipso facto they become more interesting that way.
That's true.
But I think it does matter to the owner that they just start to generate some more positive buzz because it's been bad for the last few years.
Phil.
And it was so
Yes.
bad, I would even say this, Rhett. I would add this. It was so bad at the end of this past season that they decided to move on from the head coach.
Right,
Part of
after
it
1
was
year,
that
yeah.
part of it was that Mike Vrabel was available, but they knew it was going to be a bad year. They knew he was going to take his lumps, but it became toxic, and the negative energy surrounding the team in the fan base, in the media, became such that I think they just said, we can't do this anymore. So should
Yes.
that be in play, that thinking be in play, if Travis Hunter, Mason Graham, Will Campbell, all these guys are available to them in the draft?
Look, I think you can certainly talk about that. And look, make no mistake, like watchability is a factor. And it may be a factor more from ownership than it is for general manager, head coach, who are, innately day-to-day, minute-to-minute involved in improving the roster. Because as you said, wins increase watchability. But yeah, I think there is. I would also liken it to, the Cleveland Browns. If they take Cam Ward, they immediately become an extremely intriguing team because that is an electric player with the way that he plays the game. So, look, I think you and I probably think about that. I think ownership might think about that because they, obviously viewing your asset in that way, you would love it to be watchable. You would love to have people talking about it that way. But ultimately, I think when it comes down to it, and given where Elliott has come from, in managing personnel, given where Mike was, and you look at the moves that they made in Tennessee when he was the head coach, ultimately you build bullies on both sides of the ball. You're going to find ways to make your skill positions better. And make your quarterback better, and ultimately make your team better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to hear Rhett Lewis talk more Patriots, and you're probably right. The best way toward that to becoming more relevant nationally and league-wide is build through the trenches, and 2 or 3 years down the road, you could have a really good team, whereas you could add this guy with all sorts of star power and name recognition, and you could pair him with Drake May, and you hope it works, but they still could be, at the end of the day, a losing football team.
Think about where the Titans went at skill position when Mike was there, right? And look, I know it's not all, there was a personnel, structure there with John Robinson, and there was a collaborative effort, certainly, but even when they went and got an A.J. Brown, you're talking about one of the most physical players at his position.
Bully.
And look, Travis Hunter is definitely a smaller guy, and again, it comes back to whether you view him as a receiver or a DB, but he's 170 something pounds, maybe 180, depending on what he weighs in here. I think that you're looking at a style of player too that fits what Mike wants the image of this football team to be.
I know you just dug deeply on receivers.
Yes, talk to me.
For your podcast for SiriusXM.
Yes.
We know who some of the top names are. We've heard about Ted McMillan and Luther Burden. Obviously, Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, though, who might be a little bit more off the board or a little bit more under the radar that maybe our listeners, our viewers, don't know as much about, but you watch this player and say, I just like the cut of his jive at that position?
Did I see you in Mobile?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
No.
Jack Besh, wide receiver TCU, who was the MVP of the Senior Bowl. An incredible story. I won't get into the details now, but incredibly emotional way that he ended up winning the game on a touchdown a month after his brother passed away. It's not just he is a good football player. He is a physically tough. Are you sensing? Are you sensing a theme
There's
here?
a theme
Am I
here.
saying this something over and over again? Okay.
Listen.
So strong.
This is why we should know about this guy.
Grounded through the catch. The guy plays that position the right way. He will block your face off at the point of attack. He will go up and make a 50-50 ball, a 70-30 ball. He is a contested catch machine. He is an incredible human being. There's a lot to like there. I think he's a day 2 pick all day long.
Really interesting name there, and one we haven't really considered, but
Yeah.
you rattle off some of those characteristics. Sounds like somebody not only Mike Vrabel would like, but somebody Josh McDaniels would like. Josh McDaniels wants these guys that are willing to block. Jacoby Myers was not all that physically gifted in terms of his
willingness,
speed or his explosiveness, but toughness, willingness, intelligence.
Yes.
It sounds like these are all things that Jack would be able to
Yeah.
provide the Patriots
Yeah.
if drafted.
Yeah.
When it comes to the tight end spot, it's the last thing I wanted to ask you. Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if I have the year here. I'd have to pull out an old diary and find the tear-stained page. It says, today was the day Rhett Lewis left Boston for bigger and better things.
2014.
Was it 14? Okay.
Yeah, 11 years.
I was even going to go back a little bit further. So a few years before that, when you were right in the meat of your Boston career, the Patriots had a unbelievably record-setting kind of offense with Josh McDaniels and 2 tight ends.
Yes.
Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, obviously. They have Hunter Henry already.
Yep.
If they want to add a second, who's in a little bit different mold maybe than Hunter Henry, he's a Y. I guess he's not necessarily like Gronk as a blocker.
Not a grinder,
But is there a second tight end they could add that would give this offense the kind of jolt that it needs?
Man, I love Mason Taylor from LSU. You want to talk about a natural at the position. Now, again, he's more, and credit to my buddy Daniel Jeremiah, and I'm sure if you've had a chance to talk to yet, but he's kind of merged tight ends into two pathways. One, you're from the Gronk tree. One, you're from the Kelsey tree. Taylor's a little bit more from the Kelsey tree, so I don't know if that gives you that kind of inline Yackle Y type of tight end that can help you in the run game that way. But it's Jason Taylor's son. It was the most productive tight end in LSU program history. He is still very young, but does not play that way, does not practice that way. He's got polish, and you're going to have him for a long time. I love this player, and if you want to make Drake May better, that's a player who would do it. I'd also throw Elijah Arroyo in there as a player that is kind of similar in that way. You can go find one of those grinder tight ends a little bit later on, but I do think that those two guys are really big time players.
I love it. Another LSU name.
Yes.
Little flavor from the Bayou on this podcast here, coming from a guy who spent a little bit of time in Louisiana.
That's right. Yes, that is my hometown.
I'm not biased.
It's unbiased, but I'm also from New Orleans, which is in Louisiana.
All right, let's quit this thing while we're ahead. Rhett Lewis, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Buddy. It's always great to see you.
All right, Phil.
Great stuff there from Rhett. Always a good time chatting with him. Had such a blast at the Combine, just picking everyone's brain. So many smart people there, Rhett included. Thanks so much for listening to this point. If you made it all the way through, mwah, we love you, and we mean it. Please leave us a comment on YouTube if you're watching. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Continue to leave us comments. We've got some very nice comments, and I'm going to be reading those on the next Pat's podcast on Apple Podcasts. So if you have a question you desperately want answered, you didn't get in this most recent mailbag, you want to get into a mini mailbag on the next edition of Next Pats, leave us a comment there on Apple Podcasts. We'll get to all of those. We appreciate all the 5-star ratings. You guys are the greatest. You allow us to continue to provide you with the content that we're able to provide you with. And it's content that we really enjoy putting together for you all. The interaction has been fantastic. I love doing this podcast. I know the Skull Crusher, whether it's John Henry or Adam Jacey or Annie Hall or Casey Keene, we have so many people that help out on this podcast. We love them for it, but we're thankful for them and the effort that they put into this podcast too, so that they can bring it to the people. We're bringing another one to the people next week, so keep your eyes out. Busy week this week. We'll be right back at it again next week with maybe another signing or two or a trade to talk about then. We'll see you next time.